So this is a panel from members of the science department that are engaged in a program we have called Voices that has as a goal to actually shift how we teach the sciences and consider using a culturally affirming approach. I would acknowledge that this project got actually started from a conversation Gina and I had what is now almost like 8 years ago on a workshop. And Gina is as much a part of this project as, all of us that are engaged here. Let me see if I know how to do this well. So a little bit of background has to do with actually how our population is shifting in general, right, in terms of demographics, and how as we progress in the 21st century, we understand that we have a shift and our population will be more ethnically diverse than it has been in the past. However, not all these groups are represented in the workforce in a similar way, and the shift in the workforce is a lot slower, and it already starts in a point of a lot of let's just say difference between how are individuals from different ethnic groups represented in the population at large, but then represented in what we call the STEM workforce. And the STEM workforce includes a lot of different fields, engineering, anything related to science in a broader sense. There is actually more recent data that actually shows that while for instance, Latinos and Native Americans, Pacific Islanders, and African Americans are increasing their numbers in the STEM workforce. This is not happening. This is happening mostly in lower paying positions in the overall workforce, and they are not really occupying they're not distributed evenly in all the levels of the workforce. Why is the STEM workforce such an important point of discussion is because actually the STEM workforce is one of those that is increasing more rapidly at the present, and is also the one that has the lowest percentage of unemployment and the highest earning power, right? So we're talking about a shift in our economy where we have a lot more people and we need a lot more people in STEM jobs, and these are growing. And while we, of course, cannot assume people will like a job specifically, it would be important that we as science faculty and in a school of education consider that these are, this is an important opportunity for work for a lot of our students, and they need to be ready to enter the workforce, and how is this workforce broken down is going to be relevant to understand. The proportions vary depending on what area of the workforce we're looking into. So if we're looking into health professions or life science or math or engineering, you would see kind of a distribution by race, ethnicity that varies a lot. Okay, so there is a lot of less Latinx and African American STEM workers in most of the professions except those related to health related professions, and this would include a lot of the different areas within health practice. Now, when we look at the data that has to do with when are people training and getting ready to go into the workforce, then we actually see that while those entering the areas of studies related to the STEM workforce, or STEM majors, as we call them, graduation rates are still very different between the groups. There have been improvements across the board, but it's slower, the improvement for Latinx students or African American students or Pacific Islanders and Native Americans than it is for other groups. So we see progress, but we see a slow progress overall. One thing that I find that is very interesting, and I think it's important to point out, is that when you look at graduation rates overall in college, most of the people who graduate from college are women. So around 58% of those that graduate from college are women. However, if you focus only in STEM, then that number shifts. And then we have 30% of those that graduate with STEM degrees who are women, while 64 are men, right? So even when the overall college population, overall graduate population has a higher percentage of women, when we look only into the STEM areas, we see a disproportionate lower number of women. Right. So I think this is interesting because at some point we kind of stopped talking about women in the sciences as something that, you know, it's in the past, like we're good, like there are a lot of women graduating, but the reality is that the numbers tell us a different story. Okay, so it is important, and this data is from last year. It is important to remember that. And now when we think about the intersection of race, ethnicity, and gender, right? So we're thinking you're a woman, and then you're a woman from an underrepresented group. Then now we have something else, no, a specific experience to think about. The reasons behind the disparities are not, it's not one thing. So they are multifaceted, and they include a lot of different factors that interact together: historical, economic, cultural, and so on. Research actually highlights exclusion messages that could be direct or indirect. So the lack of role models, this idea that there are field-specific abilities for specific groups, you know, or the direct ones will be like active discrimination. So we're like, oh no, this person shouldn't be here, and so on. Students from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups, in many instances report they don't feel they belong. Females also report this in larger proportion, and they feel like they shouldn't be there, so they decided to study something else. They also experience stereotype threat and social pressures. A stereotype threat is basically that idea that if you are not, and I'm not a psychologist, so I'm using my science like to interpret, to explain what is, how I see it. If I know that as a Latina, I'm not supposed to be a scientist, then every time I have to take a test or I have to do something related to the sciences, I'm going to feel very nervous and anxious and tense because I know I shouldn't be doing well. And that impacts my outcome, even if, you know, even if I know the content, even if my brain is telling me, right, I shouldn't do this well. I'm probably not going to do this well. And that really is going to impact the outcome. And there are tons of experimental studies that show that this is real and this happens to our students. There is actually books written about it and experts, and we have some of those in our faculty. So this is important to consider. I love to show how it is that actually diversity is important. It's not only important because it's something, it's because it's justice. Like it's good, you know, it's good to be just, and everybody should have access to and then graduate from a scientific degree if they wanted to. But the reality is that diversity is also a plus when we're thinking about production of knowledge, when we're thinking about innovation. Data suggests that those groups that have higher diversity, those science groups that are working, or I'm missing a word here. They are more productive and innovative. They have better performance. They use different methodologies and approaches, and they actually engage in projects that are more interesting to the overall, so to our community overall. And these, the theory suggests that this is based in something that is called cognitive diversity. So if you have people that are coming from different places, when they come together, then they can solve problems in a different way, that is in a way that is more innovative and more productive, and they have better interactions, right? So the data also says that a diverse approach to our work is good. It's a good thing for the science itself. So what are the challenges to actually do this when you are in the classroom? Well, there are many, and I will let the participants actually engage into this conversation because I think it's important, and it will vary depending, on where we are, right? Resources we have, etc. But one thing that is important to share is that science courses are high content volume courses. So there is a lot of volume to share with the students. So here we have the faculty member engaged in trying to share with the student all of this information, and then thinking also about, okay, how can I do this in a way that I can make this more interesting to the student or closer to the student, right? So the faculty member faces this challenge. How do you incorporate more recent findings and work and science that has been, that with the whole history of science, how do you incorporate that into like a general course where you're actually sharing the basic principles of a particular discipline? That also presents a challenge, because traditionally a lot of groups have not been part of the production of science itself. Then there is a difficulty on finding other diverse voices that can share their experiences in the sciences. So it's not only, right, it's like the chicken and the egg situation. So if we don't have a lot of people engaged in the field, how do you actually talk about who is represented in the field when the field, is slowly catching up with this? There are issues of time. There are a lot of time constraints. How do we actually teach all this material and then think about these other things that are also important to our students and to ourselves? And and again, that related to how to manage that properly. So with all of that in mind, we engage in this project that actually is starting its third year. Here we are representing the 2-year plan for the project. The project was divided in two major, elements. One of them was the training of faculty that happened in year 1. And in there, we have, as you can tell in the timeline, 4 trainings in which faculty learn different things and talk to experts outside the college that came and share their ideas on how it is important to have an equity lens when you look at pedagogy. What is sense of belonging? How does that play out in the classroom, in our lives? What are our actual outcomes? What are our numbers? What is our individual story as a HSI and as a department in graduating students from these backgrounds? And then the faculty engage in the development of activity and implementation of activities with a DI focus, using things that have been already developed and ideas that they are basically coming up as they learn more on their own. There are other elements to this project. We are creating a website. We're hoping to share everything the faculty are doing, and we are hoping to also build on this work and create different groups of faculty working in similar areas of knowledge or disciplines within the basic chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, and so on. So faculty can have partners in the development of activities, and they feel more comfortable engaging and finding ways in which our students feel more connected to the content. The project engaged 14 faculty members from our science department in its first year, and it now has recruited additional 4 more members, so from the original ones, and so it's there are a lot of people kind of with their different independent timelines depending on their course and so on that have been engaged with this. I need to acknowledge our funding. This project is actually funded by the NSF HSI STEM Award. It's a pilot project, and I would like to acknowledge all the participants and also Sergio Gallegos Ordorica and Lindsay Valdez that supported the initial development of the project. So now I'll stop, and if there are any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer, but I think it's more important to hear from the faculty. Gina? Any questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to let Joshua take the lead on the questions. Go ahead, Joshua.
Thank you for the intro. So I'm going to have participating faculty members in the project respond to some questions to get a better overall understanding of each member's experience in the program. So what I'll do is I'll put the questions in the chat, and then if we can like press the raise hand button, and then we can each answer in order. Okay. Okay. All right, let me know if you can see them. And then afterwards, we'll set some time aside for some audience questions that they have for you guys. All right. Does anyone want to go first?
Maybe I'll go first, I guess.
Good.
But do you want to read the question for those that might not be able to read them?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So there's 3 questions we're going to be focusing on. The first one is, what classroom activities have you designed and implemented or plan to implement in the next academic year as a result of your participation in the program? So we'll start off with that one and then go down as everyone answers.
Okay, so this year I teach general chemistry, and it was definitely a struggle. I definitely had some challenges trying to figure out what activity I was going to do with the students, because I am very content heavy, especially in the second half of chemistry that I was teaching. The content itself didn't lend itself to a project like this, especially in like the time restraint that I had. And so I ended up doing a project with the students that was considered like an extra credit project that had them look at the periodic table and had them connect the elements of the periodic table to something in their culture, and something that it spoke to them about their upbringing, themselves, with something they've worked with. And so through that, it was a Blackboard activity, and the students were able to communicate with one another and really add on and just discuss how that affected them, how that played into their culture. And the students actually responded really well to it. I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult than it was. And for them, they were able to find something, because there were so many different students from so many different backgrounds, considering the number that I have. And we were able to really have a good discussion concerning how, the stuff that they didn't know, because you don't really interact with the periodic table, even though you totally do in chemistry. They didn't, especially in high school. Just, they don't, no one really brings that in, especially to chemistry. Like, that's the last thing. So that was a good start with them. So I'm hoping to develop that more, but we'll see how it goes.
That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yes, I see it. Nelson has his hand raised.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Professor Nelson Nuñez-Rodriguez, and I teach the capstone bio for area. And thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Gina, for organizing the day. So, in the 400 level capstone course, students are almost ready for graduation. So, more or less, the initial benchmark survey that we applied, gather somehow their experience at John Jay, at the science department, at the science program. Many of them are ready just for graduation. They just want to leave. Many of them already have planned for the master program or for just entering the workforce. So the main activity that we have been developing revolve around having some sort of interaction with young scientists in the New York area. And we try to bring to the class young scientists from the same social backgrounds from the students who are taking the class. So not only those young scientists over Zoom or in person share their personal experience, their struggle, their happy moment in science, but also because the students are developing a final project in the course, I try to engage those young scientists as actual scientific mentors. So because of Zoom, sometimes imagine that you have 4 groups in the class, and each group is working over Zoom with a specific young scientist that actually sometimes know more about the topic than myself, because the students have the freedom to choose specific topics to develop the project. So in doing so, the student not only connect with the young scientists in this personal side, but at the same time, they need to be prepared regarding content to discuss the project with the young scientists. And in doing so, as Lissette and Monica said, we capitalize on the need to develop content understanding with this discussion. So it's not only mentoring, but at the same time, it's a way to reinforce content understanding and skill development with this interaction. And a third activity connected to this is to watch and to discuss some podcasts that are based on the journey of minority scientists in the neuroscience field. That is actually the topic of the course. So students get connected with people who are similar to them in terms of personal background, personal stories. And at the end of the semester, we have some sort of assessment process to gather to what extent all these interactions impact or open the eyes of a student for the scientists, the workforce that they will be entering in the subsequent semester. So the 3 activities sort of connected represents the implementation of the project in the Bio 488 course.
That was amazing. Definitely, yeah, bringing that personal connection is super, super important. Does anyone else like to answer the question?
I can answer. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you.
Cool. Yeah, so I did something similar to Nelson, actually. I've organized this John Jay Careers Day, where I brought a lot of different professionals from all around the world to speak to our students. I teach analytical toxicology, and I tried to bring a different backgrounds and life experiences, and they got to ask them and challenge them actually with the tricky questions. I told them to be as honest as possible. So don't paint, the perfect picture, but really go through the ups and downs of your career. We all know it's not easy, and I think it's even more difficult for some of our students. So that was one of the activities that I've implemented in the classroom. But again, everything is like we've all said before, it's a bit challenging if students already come with preconceived ideas actually about themselves. So it's something that you have to demystify and deconstruct. So another activity I've proposed, which I gave the name STEM to the Square, because it stands for Superpower That Embraces Me, was to tell the students to think of something that before might have been demeaning or something they thought was not as good, right? Things like having an accent, right? Sometimes you're told if you have an accent, especially when speaking in English, you're not taken that seriously. And I told them, okay, let's turn that around and make that into a superpower. If you have an accent, it means you speak at least 2 languages. So try to look at those type of things. And then obviously I've asked them to come up with their own superpower. And I got really interesting answers, things like being shy, for instance, also means that they listen more, they pay more attention. So yeah, so I was fairly happy, and it's something that I would like to continue to do in the classroom. So yeah, that's my experience.
That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing. That's so cool having them like get different qualities of themselves and like turn it into something really good. That's so cool.
Yeah, and it's fun also.
I would have loved to do something like that when I was doing chemistry. Anyone else want to answer that question? If anything, we could also move on to the next ones. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So the next question I'm going to ask is, what are the challenges you encounter in creating more inclusive classroom activities in the biological and physical sciences?
I can go in order, I guess.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
I definitely think we all struggle with our content and being able to work it in, especially depending on the level, like the year that you're teaching. You know, Anna might have more of a difficulty because she has the upper level students, right? So maybe she, you know, and that content is really like more specific. Mine is more general, but getting, you know, if your course isn't developed to lend itself to this type of learning, it can definitely be more of a struggle for us. You know, it's not an English course, it's not a poli-sci course where you can bring other things in. With the sciences, there's a lot that we can do, but I think that there has to be a lot of buy-in from a lot of different people in order to be able to incorporate it. I think that we all do excellent jobs in our own classroom to be able to prepare these activities and really think them through. Like, I think that they have excellent activities. Like, I would never even think of them. That's so creative, you know, and so I am laughing right now because I absolutely love both of them. I wish I had a good superpower, but you know, I think that that's what our struggle is, depending on what class you're teaching, what course you're teaching. And if you're teaching with other people that maybe don't buy into what you're doing. You know, if you have your own individual course, I think that might be easier and they can speak to that. But I know I might have a difficult time because there's so many of us that teach it. So, and I, you know, my course has to prepare the students for those upper level classes. So I really have to not only make sure that their self-efficacy is there, right? Because that's a big thing for chemistry, that if they don't feel like they belong, they drop out. Right. And they'll never make it to Nelson and Anna and everybody else that's above me. So I think that is definitely a challenge at my level. Teaching a 101 and a 102 course is that sometimes you can't create that inclusivity because the students themselves don't have the self-efficacy or high self-efficacy to get themselves through. So you have to develop something that really works with the content, with the student, and being able to get them to be more aware and more, you know, involved. I think that's that for Chem.
Yeah, well, I will go to follow the order. So building on what Monica said, there is always a challenge to integrate this type of activities with the content and the course learning outcomes. And in doing so, students see meaning and, you know, what is the significance of doing this? In my case, students are almost graduating, so they just want to, you know, paperwork for graduation, and that's it. Go to Barclays Center that day, go to the boat, and that's it. So they are not focusing in what else the college is you know, offering to them. And in doing so, I see a challenge in many students that they still don't have a clear picture of the workforce, the STEM workforce that is waiting for them. And there is a challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity to expand those mentoring and information opportunity for the students, not only at 411, perhaps earlier in the science major, to understand what is the meaning to apply for a law and to get a master, or what is the meaning, to get a PhD in the field, or the different job opportunities. I think that for many students, the job opportunities matter, and that may be a path to integrate mentoring opportunities and some sort of career advisory opportunities. So telling a student what can be done with a science degree, what can be done with a STEM degree. And from there, a student could connect better content, those mentoring opportunities that we present for them, and what they have in mind, the workforce opportunity. So connecting these points may be a way to better bring meaning to the students so they understand what we're trying to do for them. It's not only inclusion, but at the same time, foster that sense of belonging. And as we discussed with Lissette in one of the previous workshops, trying to have a meaningful and working definition of sense of belonging for us and for them. When we say sense of belonging, what do we mean? And if we have clarity on that, we can, bring that clarity to them. I see opportunities in that sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, having that sense of belonging is super important in the STEM field. Absolutely. Does anyone else like to share?
I mean, for me, it's more of the same. I'm already happy, if I get STEM students, because that means they made it through 4th year. But to me, yeah, I don't want to repeat myself. I agree with Monica and Nelson, and it's the lack of representation in the field itself. It's maybe they make it through the degree, but then they think they're not good enough to actually make it through the workforce, which is not true. So, but yeah, I think it's also a historical problem, and it's something that will take time.
Absolutely. Yes, I see a hand raised.
Yeah, hi. So this is really interesting. I like the activities that were designed. The second discussion was very important about the belonging. So I don't want to, I am speaking for Julie now, but don't we have Julie and Betty to create a better connection to the workforce? And I was wondering if, I don't know, probably we can't form a club, but I don't know how students, because I think students, they should already motivate each other, because our student body is so diverse. Just meeting all the other students should be a boost to here, I do belong here, because there are so many of us here. I don't know how we can foster that as a science department. I don't know, because we don't have like a lounge, we don't have a club. I'm not sure. I was speaking to one of my graduate students about her experience at John Jay, and she, where she felt at home in Latin studies, because that was her background. So.
Can I answer that question? Because we actually had a training on this. And Nelson and I were part of it, but I know that the other faculty were part of it also previously. And I had brought up, when I went to John Jay back in 1999 to 2001, we were in the other building, and the north building, and we had a room that we all went to, 4,400. Well, I'll never forget it. Everything was in that room. It was just a classroom for students to be able to go into. And granted, the program was smaller then, but that's how we survived, because we ate there, we did our work there, we studied there, we were there on the weekends. There's no, and if we wanted to, access the faculty, their office was right there, so we could just go down and talk to them. And for us, that was a huge thing of us being together. And I think the kids don't have that right now. They don't have some place to go physically to sit down and talk to one another. And we want to say like, you know, the MSRC and things like that, but it's not a place for them to go, to just sit down and, you know, have a moment with each other. I think that was a big thing for me that helped me survive through undergrad. And I was with Marcel, and I was with, you know, Jack was there. And so that was a culture. And now here we are back at John Jay. And I feel like that one thing is definitely missing, right? Because it was a team. We were a team back then. We got each other through that program. And now I feel like the kids are so many more and they don't have one place to go to find themselves, if that makes sense. So I feel like the fact that you said that, you know, that was a huge thing that I brought up throughout this. So hi, Julie.
Hi, sorry. Everyone was like sharing out, and I just didn't want to interject at all because what you're bringing into the classrooms is really, really wonderful and special. From what I see in the first years, they start to doubt themselves. So I'm glad that Monica, you get them before me and can kind of start that early. So just to kind of get back to like what Meki was saying, I'm trying to kind of do the same thing with like fostering the cohesive like group. The limitation that I have is that I only work with 200 students. Obviously, I don't limit myself to that because that would be ridiculous. We need to retain the students. They need to feel like they are part of a group that can support them. So what I've been trying to do is set up a little conference room, right? Kind of like the room that was in North, so that they can come and just sit with each other, study, just meet people that are involved in similar majors or interested in similar fields of study. And then also, for lack of a better way of saying it, COVID really did them a disservice. Like they don't know how to interact socially one-on-one in a physical setting. So I am the bizarre woman running through the halls, you know, trying to get them to engage. And so I will bring other cohort members around to students who I know are not part of my cohort, and they've developed really great friendships through that. So it's going to take time and it's going to have to be like a group effort. But if you see a student struggling, like, please just let me know. I'm so more than happy to get them involved or just get them connected to a student that maybe they can resonate with ethnically or just on a expressive background or interest wise, right? Because that's so important. I remember that I had similar issues where I still had an accent when I was coming to school, and I had to code switch, right? And some of these students don't have that ability because it's ingrained, and they have to love every aspect of who they are, right? Like Anna, like that is a superpower, right? Speaking multiple language, absolutely, but they don't see it as such. So yeah, I think it's a larger conversation, but we do need to create this sense of community and space where students can go and not feel like it. Like the MSRC now is kind of, it's where you go as almost like a punishment, right? Because you're struggling. And so that's no longer a space where students can feel comfortable unless they're already getting the A's and they're already tutors. Yeah. Sorry, I know I talk a lot.
No, it's perfectly okay. I'd say a lot of the stuff you're saying, I kind of actually relate to, being that I'm still an undergrad myself. Having like experiences like in classrooms where like the projects are more engaging, or like having professors come and talk to us, it definitely really helps the learning environment. I remember my first year doing like ISP courses, and they were very heavy project engagement. A lot of professors interacting with us throughout the process, and so definitely that has helped. I say for me in the undergraduate process. So I agree with everything you say. Nelson?
Yes, I just want to reinforce Monica's comment about, they need to have an space outside the classroom. So students need to have that sort of continuum beyond the class period where they go, where they congregate, or where they feel safe interacting and sharing ideas and, a struggling moment. So in doing so, we know where the students are at any given moment, and, it's a physical way to create that, togetherness, because they need that mainly, as the professor said, after the pandemic. So that, having a physical space that is, STEM students, science program room, nurture possibility to do programs there as activities, and just having a space for the student. I think that that's something that could in the future help, to foster whatever we do in the classroom. We know that there is a physical space that would be like a continuation of this initiative. Thank you.
Yes, see a hand raised.
Hi, everybody. I'm Wynn. I work with some of you, and it's great to meet and hear about some of what you all are doing. Such important work. And I have a bunch of questions. I'm gonna put two out there, okay? So the first one is, I heard you talk about, transferability of these experiences, and the challenges of working to make all classrooms more culturally responsive or inclusive, because there's a lot of faculty and a lot of students. So I'm just wondering if you have ideas about like what conditions need to be in place to bring more people along in your work, how we could support that. And the other question I have is about how you're thinking. I really love what y'all are saying about sort of the integration of preparing for postgraduate paths and building community and fostering students' sense of agency and lifting their identities so that they feel, more welcome in the sciences. And I wonder what else you see possible about ways to integrate sort of preparation for the workplace with your inclusive efforts, because I just think that experience is so significant to preparing people to be able to do their jobs, their first jobs out of college, those are my questions.
I have ideas. So one thing that I propose that I can't implement into the lab for biology as an actual activity is what I'm seeing a lot in other institutions that I work with, is in the first year developing this sense of like creating a career path for yourself and envisioning what that looks like, and then bringing in others, kind of the way Anna does, that resonate with that pathway. So once I took a little time off, I was like brainstorming this idea, and I was like, okay, having them come in first year, develop a LinkedIn, and then find and connect with others that present similarly to themselves, that they resonate with, right? That have held jobs that they are interested in, connect with alumni that have kind of gone along the same similar trajectory, use their instructors or future instructors as a resource to put them in touch with individuals such as those. And then obviously like creating this scaffold where they're seeing that it's not necessarily a linear path to the end goal of a career, because a lot of them think that they are going to graduate and then immediately, I had to explain to someone that to be a medical examiner, they had to go to medical school, right? So like they're not doing the work first year, but by doing so, they'll develop these little pockets of, this is what I want to do. let me prepare my initial like resume, LinkedIn, learn how to use these platforms that they're not comfortable with yet. And then also just see themselves in what's already out there, right? Because we can bring it to them in the classroom, but as everyone said, time is limited. The buy-in is hard to get across the board, especially for the classes that have sections. So this is like a way in which they can kind of do it on their own timeline, because they have a lot of different responsibilities and organizations and clubs that they're trying to be a part of. So it gives them a little more autonomy, which I think is really important in building their identity as well.
I'm gonna piggyback off of Julie. Mine's a little different because I'm gonna talk more about like inside the classroom. I think that our old education system doesn't lend itself to group work. It doesn't lend itself to working in communities, right? You walk into a lecture hall and the chairs are all separate and the desks are all separate and you are separate, right? That's the vibe that you get. There's no inclusivity because you're by yourself sitting at your desk. And at the end of the day, you have to take the exam by yourself, rightly so, right? You need to test your knowledge. But working together just doesn't work, right? It doesn't work in the sense of you walk into a huge lecture hall and your classmate is 4 feet from you, right? That's not working together. And so these kids don't know how to work together. So we bring back into the COVID, we bring back to the bringing them together, working together. It just doesn't happen, right? So, Wynn and I, we've had these discussions and I know that it would cost a lot of money, but at the end of the day, our classrooms are not set up for our students to be able to learn together, right? They're not. And now everything's about that. Whether you work in Google Pods or you work in you're constantly working together. We're presenting here together and we all work together and we don't have, our students don't see that. So there's no like flex learning environment for them. And especially for, an English class, classes that are larger, could be larger, right? And could facilitate working together. And we don't have that option in our classroom itself, right? The physical structure of it. So I think that's a huge thing that I think a lot of people don't realize. You walk into a classroom, everybody's separate, right? But you're like, I want you to work together, but you can't. Because you physically can't. So those physical structures are also an issue. I think that's a huge thing, especially at our level, my level, like the lower level. I think that's a very big thing for those students. And it's kind of, you limit them without wanting to limit them, if that makes sense. So I think that's a very big thing for, especially my classrooms. Right. If I don't have that, I have a flipped classroom. So if I don't have my students together, I can't teach them the way I need to teach them because they're not, physically together. Hope that answers you, Wynn.
That's why you got to do lab. The lab bench is a great space for people to. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie. We've said this before, and I'm so sorry. And I'm just going to add this one thing. I think that for me personally, in the Gen Chem classes, they need to be restructured more so that the students can think. I mean, a very big thing that I've been thinking about and discussing with colleagues is, everything's green chemistry now. And the kids can learn how to do chem in a bigger picture and that costs half the price. And let them, because I could tell you in Gen Chem, the first thing is they're like, I have to buy this, I have to buy that. Yeah, as scientists, we've all been through it. We've all paid $300 for a textbook. But our kids, they can't afford that now. And so it's that's another thing, a struggle for them is like, they see the book and they're like, oh, I can't afford this. I can't afford to be a scientist. As crazy as that sounds, they're like, I have to pay for bio, I have to pay for chem, I have to pay for calculus, I need a calculator. And for them, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Whereas when they were in high school, they didn't have to do that, right? Everything was supplied to them. So when we get into the colleges, especially first year, and they first day they get smacked in the face with what they need to do, they pull back and they're like, I can't do this. I can't do. And that's the first thing, is that they feel that shock and they're like, I can't. And so I would love in the future to make the Gen Chem classes more project-based or more green chem, to direct them towards tox, to direct them towards cell molecular bio. There's chemistry in everything. So that can completely be, it just takes the person to be able to design it. So the support for the design would have to be there. The buy-in from the department would have to be there. And the proof, I would have to prove it. So that's what it comes down to. Because I would have to prove to my colleagues up there that we can still teach chemistry to these kids. They can learn it. It can be inclusive. They can bring in their identity and they still learn the content and are able to take it and go with it. Thanks, Julie. I forgot about that. Thank you.
Yep, I see hand raised.
Yeah, I want to tell Monica that I'm on the curriculum committee this year, so I'll bring it up. You give me a blurb.
Me too.
Oh, you
We're
too.
working
Okay,
together.
so well, I'm
Yes.
glad I'm here to hear your reasoning about this. It's an interesting session.
Thank you, Maggie.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions so far? Any questions from our audience? People tuning in that are not part of the project? All righty. So for our final question, do you guys have anything you want to share regarding your overall experience that wasn't touched upon already regarding participating in the program?
I've spoken enough.
Yeah, thank you so much, by the way. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
But it's been great. It's been a great development. I love being part of it. So yeah.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. I think that I also
Yeah.
said everything. Oh. So, no, for me, it's fine. I think that, it has been a pleasure to be part of this activity. And I think that, I see an effort to keep integrating it with other activities. And hopefully, as Monica said, everything at some point has to filter down to the curriculum. Otherwise, it's one semester yes, another semester not. When things are rooted in the curriculum, are grounded, approved, so we can have, a baseline to keep developing. So it's important to bring everything to the curriculum at some point.
Absolutely.
I guess I've been doing something like non-traditional because I haven't been able to truly modify the curriculum. And that's something I've been talking to Dr. Rosati about. But I've been bringing in students that are further along in the tracks that the students are interested in. So when they tell me what their motivations are to pursue toxicology, or what their motivations are to pursue cellular and molecular biology or forensic science, I bring students in. Either it's my tech, like I will request a specific tech to come in, or my other students who are involved in CIE or have taken me before and are now sophomores, juniors, even seniors. They'll come back into the classroom, and randomly, when we have like a little bit of a break between recitation and the actual lab experiment, or if we have some time afterwards, they will comment on their experience so that there's visibility. And they'll share that it is a struggle at some point or another, but it's worth it in the end, right? So seeing someone they can relate with closer to their space sometimes is helpful too, because we bring in career discussions, but that's still in their mindset very far away from where they're at. I mean, it makes more sense with Nelson and Anna because they're right there, right? They're about to graduate, they're about to enter the workforce. But when I have them and when Monica has them, they're still so green that we may lose them because they don't see the progression. So that's been helpful is what I've seen. We'll see how I can modify curriculum.
Great. I think Win has a question in the chat about green chem.
Yeah, green chem is just, yeah, I said green because, you know, you want to make chemistry environmentally friendly, right? We're always talking about like using better products and waste and things of that sort. And if we can do like a green chem curriculum, it cuts the money for the department. And I mean, like, you know, we're not using harsh chemicals anymore. They can use baking soda. You know what I mean? Like, and the same lesson is there. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. They just don't have to use these hard chemicals. So I think that that's, you know, again, they could still do titrations. They could still do everything they need to do, but they're doing it with different things. And then they know that it's part of a bigger picture, right? You can do science and it could still be part of a larger project. Right now they do cookbook labs, and I say cookbook because it's like, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, and these kids have no idea what they're doing. And they get out of lab and they go to the other classes and they cannot tell you one thing that they've done in Gen Chem, not one. And, you know, they should know what everybody should know, like what chem is. And I'm not being biased, right? But everybody should know how chem plays into your life. And these kids can't make that connection because they're doing cookbook labs. They're not thinking of a bigger picture. They're thinking, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. Let me write a report that I'm AI generating, and that's it. And so that's what the goal would be, to open it up and have the correct instructors in place to like get this off the ground and lift it. And so it's much more environmentally productive. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? And somebody mentioned this before too. I think you're making like this important distinction between like process and concept, right? So like you can learn the steps to do something, but do you understand the concept? And it seems like you're describing that's a missing link. And I think that's like a very good distinction to make to other people when you're trying to explain what you're trying to do, you know?
Alrighty. I believe that concludes today's panel. Thank you all for participating. Really appreciate it. And I hope everyone learned today. So yeah, it's very exciting. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye.